Okay, great. Well, welcome everybody. How's everybody doing this morning?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Excellent. It's nice to hear your voices. Okay, so my name is Gretchen Graber, as you may or may not know, and I am the East Side YEER Coordinator for Eastern Washington. And I'm so happy to have you here with me today, and we'll just go over the agenda really quick, and we'll do introductions. And I'd like to introduce my colleague, Janneke Petersen. Morning, Janneke.
Good morning, everyone.
And Janneke is the curriculum creator, and it's a really incredible resource that we're really excited to share with the teachers, and really appreciate all of your, you as volunteer stewards to make this program basically a reality. So we're really excited about that. So why don't we just go through and have everybody just tell us your name, tell us maybe what your job is your background is, and also what ancestral lands do you live on or work on? And I'll start with myself. I am in the conjunction of multiple tribal lands, and it's the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, which includes the Walla Walla and the Cayuse. I'm also in an intersection where the Yakima tribe is prevalent. And then one of the schools is near the Wanapum tribe. So actually, Janneke, if you wanted to just go second and do that, if you could, please. You're muted.
Sorry. Sure. Okay, so my name is Janneke Petersen, and I am the, like Gretchen said, the curriculum creator, as well as the coordinator for Western Washington. And I am also just like so thrilled to be here, so excited, and so excited to be partnering with all of you. This program wouldn't be happening without you. So I know this is like an exciting and, new volunteer experience, and it's not like in all parts, not totally streamlined. So I just appreciate you all going on the adventure with us. And let's see, the tribal lands that I occupy now are the Klallam, Quileute, and Chimicum peoples, and known as Port Townsend now, where I live. Gretchen, there was one more thing I was supposed to say. What was the other thing?
Oh, well, you're kind of your job, and that's the West Side coordinator.
Yep.
And curriculum.
So I got everything then?
Yep, you did.
Okay.
So
Great.
I'll just let people go next. Just go ahead and choose yourself.
Well, I'm brave. I'll go next. My name's Janneke Helgeson. I live here in Kennewick, which is at the confluence of the Tri-Cities. And that's the Snake, Yakima, and Columbia River intersection where most of the Native people spent their winters because it's a beautiful, relatively moderate climate. And what brought me to this position and the volunteering is a lifelong love for ecology and nature and my planet. I am a horticulturalist by degree. I got my degree through University of Maryland in the early Cretaceous period. We won't say when, but and I love to spread my passion to kids. I love this age group. And as my mother-in-law, who is age, said to me, "You're doing what from middle school?" And I'm like, "Yes, I am. I love this age group." So that's what I do. I'm currently a technical editor That's what I work on at home. So that's it.
Welcome and thank you, D'Artagnan.
Thank you. D'Artagnan, just so we go.
Thank you,
D'Artagnan.
And yeah, gotcha.
Well, I guess I'll go next. I'm Jordan Rickman. I currently live and work on the land of the Yakima Nation. My background is in wildlife biology. I did my master's degree at Central Washington University doing research on small mammals for the I-90 Snoqualmie Pass East project.
Ooh.
And now I currently work for Conservation Northwest on the Sagelands Heritage Program.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, I'll go. I'm Lyle Stoltman, and I'm the livestock coordinator and cost share coordinator for the Grant Conservation District here in Moses Lake. I'm an agronomist by training, and I guess we kind of work and live here in the Wanapum Nation and also do cultural resources stuff with the Colvilles and the Yakima Nation.
Thank you, Lyle.
I can go next. I don't know where my camera is. Let's try that.
It should be a little.
There.
Oh, there you are.
I got it.
Good job.
Okay, I'm Tina Miller, and I live in the easiest coastal Salish people, many tribes, kind of overlapping their areas. That works. I am retired now. I spent about 30 years working for King County in numerous roles, but mostly as a volunteer and restoration coordinator for King County Parks. So I've done projects like this with like the whole school, a sixth grader class come out and do restoration projects on parklands. So I'm really excited about continuing that journey with the Rose Hill folks.
Thank you, Tina. Happy to have you. Hey, Mickey, why don't you go?
All right. I'm Mickey Simons, and I live in Prosser, which is Yakima land, and work in Petersen, which is also Cayuse, Umatilla, and Walla Walla. And I am the preschool teacher at Petersen, but that's just 2 days a week. So that allows me time to work on this program, and I'm quite excited about it. During COVID, I educated myself a little bit about the shrub step and joined the Native Plant Society and here in the Columbia Basin chapter, and I've just been learning and feeling. We have planted a native plant garden, so we're pretty excited about protecting the area where we live and preserving it, because we understand how fragile it is and it's a rapid disappearance.
Yeah, Mickey, and you're the secretary of SE2?
Oh, correct. Yes. Yeah. In 2016, well, we did the Prosser Science Expo because we just wanted to give kids mainly and their families a way to connect with science in a way that was fun and non-threatening, and also to inspire kids to perhaps pursue science careers in science, different kinds of careers, to see that they could be outside if they wanted to be, and all kinds of stuff like that. And then I think the next year or the following year, we became a nonprofit so that individuals and businesses that were helping to fund putting on the expo could actually get something official from a 501c3. So yeah.
Important work in Eastern Washington, for sure.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Uphill, but we're trying.
Exactly. Okay, how about Jordan?
I think I already went.
Oh, sorry, my bad. I'm learning everybody. Okay, how about Christina?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Rebellia with the Grant County Conservation District. I'm their assistant manager. And I'm here in Moses Lake, the traditional lands of the Colville and Yakimas. I am just really excited about this. I think, getting kids outside and getting outside is just the best way we can create lifelong stewards of our resources. So just excited to be part of the project.
Thank you, Christina. Okay, how about Ronald?
Hey everybody, can you hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. I'm Ron Tricki. I'm the new watershed planner for Grant County Conservation District. I'm 3 days into the job, so I get to tag along with everything that's going on. So I'm pretty excited to jump into things. My prior work, I did some water quality analysis with the Spokane tribe before I came out here. So I'm just excited to get in and start learning some new stuff.
Love it. Love to have you. Thanks, Ron. How about Elliot?
Can everybody hear me all right? I'm having some audio issues.
Yeah.
Elliot Dahl with the Grant County Conservation District. I do a lot of our outreach and other programs. I believe the lands are the Colvilles, the Wanapum that we primarily work on.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Elliot. How about Deanna?
Deanna Elliott. I am the VSP planner for Grant County Conservation District, and I also do some GIS work for the district as well. I have a background in education, like on-farm ag education, and I believe we work on the Colville Yakima lands.
Okay. And thank you, Deanna. I will share a resource that is a GIS-based map where you can plug in your location and it shows the tribal lands that you could potentially be on and occupying. So that's just another resource that I'll add to this bulk of other resources that we have for you. And okay, did we get everybody? I think we did. Okay, great. So let's just go to, I just kind of want to start with what y'all bring, and the introductions kind of showed the breadth of experience that you all have and bring to the program. And it's like, I'll just read it. All YEER stewards bring their own knowledge and expertise about science, restoration, conservation, and formal education training, and informal education training as well. We just want to recognize that we're a diverse group of people, and we have lots of different relevant perspectives. And that's kind of I think one of the richnesses of the program is that we'll all be able to share that knowledge together with ourselves and of course with the students. And then because people are so knowledgeable and have their own ideas about the program and what would work and what wouldn't work, and what we really welcome those ideas. But I just want to say at the same time, the curriculum and the lessons are set to follow an intentional set of topics presented in an intentional order in the curriculum. So just please understand our outdoor actions as volunteer stewards is an extension of the YEER curriculum. So as people share ideas, and we could do this and we could do that, and we can do so much more than just what we're presenting here today, but we want to take it step by step. And that's why this year is the first year of our pilot program. And then the 2022-23 school year will be the second pilot year. So we're actually piloting it for 2 years. So that's why we're kind of welcoming your feedback and your ideas and trying to incorporate that. And then just again, a note about your experiences. You know, when the opportunity presents itself, when you're working with the students, go ahead and share your your educational background, some work experiences that you've had. And part of the value of the program is the students get to spend time with you as professionals and subject matter experts. And then maybe a question you could ask yourself is, what would you have told your 12-year-old self? Now, I know that's so young to choose a career, but for those kids who are thinking about it, some are and some aren't, you know, that could be valuable information for them that you could share with them. So I think right now what we'll go ahead and get into and invite Janneke here to start going over the lesson plans for our, well, for the activities that we'll be responsible for. Janneke, you want to take it from here? Or do you have anything to add, Janneke?
No, I love everything you said about, you know, it being a pilot program and that, yeah, and about people, you know, bringing themselves and sharing with themselves about the work they do, and, you know, just connecting with students during the work is like really can have an impact on students. So that's awesome. And Gretchen, I just wanted to make sure, because I'm seeing on your schedule here that you want me to share about the Shrub Step ecosystem field trip that the Eastern stewards will be doing. But I'm wondering if you want me to give an and I see that later on you want me to do an overview of the lessons. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So should we excuse the YEER West stewards now?
Well,
or would you like me to do an overview of the lessons now and then get into that field trip later?
Actually, whatever you feel is best. And
okay.
Yeah, whatever you feel is best. And
yeah, I feel like it might be best just to flip-flop them.
Okay, great.
If that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it
okay,
is. I thought you could change the agenda that suited for you, you know, so that's great. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so let me do screen share. Just give me a second here. Okay, and I'm gonna do okay. And let's see. Okay. So can folks see my screen okay?
Yes, very good.
Great, good. So yeah, you know, like Gretchen said, this is the work that the restoration work that you do with students outside is really it's what makes YEER quite unique in programs that work, restoration programs that work with students, is that students aren't just doing, you know, a single or even several restoration days, you know, where maybe they're not really sure why they're removing noxious weeds or planting or whatever the restoration task is. What makes YEER unique is students have been studying restoration ecology for 4 weeks in their classroom leading up to the restoration work. And they actually are designing a restoration proposal for their site with the goal of making the restoration site more like a healthy ecosystem. And so all of the YEER pilot teachers, all the classroom teachers, they've committed, it's a big commitment. They've committed to, sorry, excuse me. They've committed to teaching this unit as a part of the YEER program. So, you know, students it's not the restoration days, they're not just service learning days, they're actually connected to a rigorous science curriculum that's connected to NGSS, which are the national science standards. So in a nutshell, by the time you work with students on those 3 restoration days, they will have a solid scientific understanding that native communities form the foundation of healthy biodiverse ecosystems and food webs. They will have built that understanding over the last 4 weeks. So the unit driving questions, so a unit refers to like a sequence of lessons that, and I know many of you are educators, so sorry if this is all old news to you, but a unit is a sequence of lessons and typically lasts 3 to 4 weeks, usually in middle school. And so this unit is 12 lessons, and there are 2 unit driving questions. The first is, how can we, as student restoration ecologists, make damaged land in our community more like a healthy ecosystem? And that question's tweakable, right? So each teacher might tweak it to their specific restoration site. For example, how can we as student restoration ecologists make our schoolyard more like a healthy ecosystem? How can we make this area of Twin Rivers Ranch more like a healthy ecosystem? And then the second unit question is, what makes an ecosystem healthy, right? So students are guided by their teacher when they introduce this question to like, well, if we're supposed to make our schoolyard more like a healthy ecosystem, what is an ecosystem, first of all, and what makes an ecosystem healthy? You know, we've been given this challenge, so we have to figure out what makes an ecosystem healthy. So lesson 1, and this is a little complicated, and I tried to make it as clear as I can. Maybe I need to, I don't know. It's lesson 1 is broken into 2 parts. And so, or 2 days. And so, oh, you know what, sorry, one second here. So it's broken into 2 days, and day 1 is taught by the teacher in the schoolyard, and day 2 is led by the YEER coordinator with all of your help. If you're going on a field trip. If you're not going on a field trip, because we have a whole mix of schools, like if your students, or sorry, if they're not going on a field trip, then you won't be a part of this. So lesson 1, the teacher takes the students into the schoolyard. And this is specifically for schools that have their restoration site in schoolyards. This looks a little different for the schools that have restoration sites and preserves, land trust preserves. So the teacher takes the students out into the schoolyard. They say, hey, have you ever really looked at our schoolyard? Let's look around, let's make some observations. They do a wonder walk activity where the teacher just leads them through the schoolyard and gives them some wonder walk cards with some questions to get them start noticing their schoolyard. And it's a silent walk. And then the teacher says, hey, let's take a look at this one location in our schoolyard. Let's go over here. The teacher gives them a kind of sheet to fill out, use their 4 senses to make observations. And then the students write down, things that they hear in this, and this is the restoration site. The teacher doesn't tell them yet it's the restoration site, but it is. And so students write down, they make a drawing of the restoration site. They list the sounds they hear. They feel different textures. They count all different kinds of, well, there won't be that many kinds of plants, but they count the different kinds of plants they see. They don't have to know the names. They can just make up the names of the plants. And they listen to the sounds. And then the teacher comes back to the classroom and says, hey guys, we have this task that's been given to us by the Washington Native Plant Society. And then they read this letter. So let me just give you a couple minutes to read silently through that letter. This is the letter that students read before they've met you, right? This is day 1 of the unit, before they've gone on a field trip or had a virtual lesson on what a healthy ecosystem looks like. So this is just right after they saw the restoration site in their schoolyard. So go ahead and read that letter for a couple minutes.
And just before you do that, I'll just say I'm putting in the chat as Janneke talks about these compare two locations, is on page 4 of today's agenda. And then the Wonder Walk is on page 8, just for your reference. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully you've read through that, and you'll see that there's a place that can be customized at the bottom of the letter. And so the teacher is actually going to customize this, and hopefully you're okay with them putting in your name for you, or your names if there are multiple year stewards for each school. And then also the principal if the restoration site's in the schoolyard, because the principal represents the land manager. So that's part 1. And then they make a driving question board and they ask all these questions. Okay, so we've been given this challenge. We have to make our schoolyard more like a healthy ecosystem. How the heck do we do that? You know, students probably say, well, what is an ecosystem? What makes an ecosystem healthy? So then the teacher says, well, let's go visit an ecosystem. Let's go see a shrub steppe ecosystem, or if you're in Western Washington, a healthy forest, and see what we can find out. And that takes us to day 2. And so, or part 2. And during that day, students either go on a field trip to a healthy ecosystem, that'd be a shrub steppe in Eastern Washington forest and Western, or with some of the schools, as you know, we weren't able to arrange buses and everything, and or the number of students was too high. So in that case, the year coordinator, that would be me or Gretchen, will go into the classroom and do a really condensed, 50-minute lesson, introducing students in a virtual way to that healthy ecosystem. Let's see. Oh, for some reason I'm not, oh, there we go. So the lesson 2, this is after, and I'm going to go into that part 2 or day 2 of lesson 1 when students go to a healthy ecosystem. I know that several of you, I guess it would be the Petersen stewards, not Wahluke. Am I right, Gretchen? Just the Petersen stewards are going on a field trip to a shrub steppe.
Both are going to a field trip.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. Both are, but yes, thank you. So I'm going to go over that later, and we'll get into the details of what that field trip looks like. So we'll get to that later, later in the agenda. And now I'm just going to take you through kind of briefly through the rest of the lessons. So lesson 2 is after they've gone to visit a healthy ecosystem, they're back in the classroom with their classroom teacher, and they ask this question. So what is the UN Decade on Restoration? Why should we make damaged land more like a healthy ecosystem? Why should we, isn't our schoolyard fine as it is? And what problem does it help solve? So students find out that there is a global decline in biodiversity or a mass extinction undergoing, and they ask questions about how they can restore their schoolyard or land in their community to increase biodiversity, thereby participating in the UN Decade on Restoration. And the UN Decade on Restoration is a really kind of a big part of the curriculum. So students are, doing this really localized restoration work in partnership with you all, but they're also participating in a global movement. I'm sure most of you are aware, it's a really exciting time for ecosystem restoration right now. There's tremendous international energy, effort, and funding right now with the UN Decade. And so it's just awesome that students are going to be tapping into that in multiple, parts of the unit. Okay, so lesson 3 and I'll try to go a little more quickly through these. So, and remember, these are the lessons taught by the classroom teacher leading up to your first day of restoration. And the whole goal of these lessons is for students to figure out what makes an ecosystem healthy so that they can make their restoration site more like a healthy ecosystem. So, so on this lesson, they're just learning to categorize things. And so they learn that ecologists categorize things and beings in an ecosystem into abiotic and biotic, and then into producers, consumers, and decomposers in order to make sense of what they observed in the healthy ecosystem. They also find out that restoration ecologists categorize things into native, non-native, and invasive. And they use an online tool in Jamboard to do that. So lesson 4, they ask the question, what is everything in an ecosystem made of deep down, and what is carbon? So they read introductory articles about matter and energy. They find out about carbon, and they make kind of an initial model of how they're thinking about how matter cycles and energy flows through a healthy ecosystem. In lesson 5, the focus question is, how do plants grow and survive in an ecosystem? And they, so they watch this really cool time-lapse video of a plant, an acorn growing into an oak tree. And they ask a question, you know, where does matter come from as a plant is growing? And they analyze and interpret evidence about where matter in plants come from in order to find out what plants need to grow and survive. During part 2, they use a computer model. They observe stomata on a leaf. They do a little celery investigation to model how xylem brings water from the roots of a plant to the leaves of a plant. And they do all this to understand how photosynthesis works. And this is all connected to NGSS and the national science standards. Oh geez, let's see. Wants to play the video here. Okay, so lesson 6 is how do animals grow and survive in an ecosystem? And so they analyze evidence in order to figure out that animals eat food that contains carbon-containing molecules like sugar. And then they break down those carbon molecules for energy and for growth. And now they're ready to start developing their model of a healthy ecosystem. And so they represent their understanding of photosynthesis and respiration that they've learned in the last 2 lessons in their healthy ecosystem model template, which is either a digital model in Jamboard or a printed version of that Jamboard model and they cut and paste photos into the model. That is up to the teacher if they want to do digital or paper models. And so they and modeling is as you educators know, scientific modeling is like at the core of NGSS. So they model a healthy ecosystem and they add to that model as they learn more throughout this unit. Okay, this is just an optional lesson, really student-driven investigation where the teacher says, hey, you've learned a lot about photosynthesis and respiration. We've learned about these equations, but do you believe it? So they say, come up with a question that you have using these materials to further your understanding of photosynthesis and respiration. And then students come up with a question and plan and carry out an investigation. Which is another science and engineering practice of NGSS. So lesson 7, and by the way, so this was a recent decision. I decided to create 2 versions of this unit. And version 2 actually skips the photosynthesis and respiration lessons. And I'm just sharing this with you so you know that some teachers are going to be skipping over the photosynthesis and respiration lessons, especially the 6th grade teachers, because the 6th graders aren't going to have as much prior knowledge about matter, energy, and molecules which is really like prior knowledge that's required for learning about photosynthesis and respiration. So it's up to the teachers if they want to include like this whole unit provides a really excellent context for learning about photosynthesis and respiration, but it's not like fundamental to the unit. They can still design a proposal to make the restoration site more like a healthy ecosystem without the photosynthesis and respiration piece. So lesson 7 is how do producers, consumers, and decomposers interact in an ecosystem? So this is a really big lesson where students use photos of common organisms in a healthy ecosystem. So either in Eastern Washington, that would be organisms in a shrub steppe. In Western Washington, that's organisms in a healthy Western forest, Western Washington forest. To build an example of a food web in their personal copy of the ecosystem models. And again, they do that digital models or paper models. And they do this in order to find out, they build this food web in order to find out that organisms interact with each other through predator-prey interactions, and that the food of all animals in an ecosystem can be traced back to plants. So in part 2, they use photos of organisms found at the restoration site. So if there are noxious weeds or lawn found at the restoration site, they use those photos to build an example of to build a model of the restoration site and add photos of organisms that eat those noxious weeds. And this is all, there's information in a diet table they use, so they're not making up these eating interactions. And what they see, they compare these two models side by side and they say, whoa, look, there looks like if there's a diversity of plants, that really supports more a diversity of animals. And if you have, one noxious weed or 2 noxious weeds, that doesn't support a diversity of animals as much as a diverse native plant community does. And I know this is a little, I'm getting maybe a little bit too much into the weeds, but it's helpful, I think, because you'll know all the knowledge that students have going into when they're actually doing the restoration work with you. So lesson 8 is a really cool lesson. The question is, how do organisms interact in mutually beneficial ways in an ecosystem? So they do kind of a jigsaw research activity where they break out into groups, and each group focuses on one type of mutually beneficial interaction. So they learn about mycorrhizal fungi or lichen, and they learn about seed dispersers in the ecosystem, or they learn about pollination. These 3 examples of mutually beneficial interactions in an ecosystem. And these are tailored to East and West using specific organisms from those ecosystems. Lesson 9 is super fun. This is a classic for you environmental educators. I think you might be familiar with this. So how does the availability of food resources affect populations of organisms in the ecosystem? And so they do a running game outside that models how populations of organisms influence each other. So each student takes on the role of a native plant or an insect or a bird. And then they see how through a running game, how when one population increases or decreases, it affects another population. And they're actually generating data from this game. And then on day 2, they graph that data using a triple line graph to show how, if native plants decline, so do insects. If insects decline, so do birds. And it's kind of cool, this game. It takes a little practice for the teacher to facilitate, but it actually produces data that generates a really excellent model for students to analyze how populations of organisms affect each other. All right, lesson 10, for you teachers, about SERS, or claim evidence reasoning. So they write a claim about how a noxious weed that's prevalent in their area affects the biodiversity of their local ecosystems. So for example, in Western Washington, there might be Himalayan blackberry that's really prevalent at the restoration site. So they would answer the question, how does Himalayan blackberry affect biodiversity in an ecosystem. And then they choose one of these claims. It doesn't affect biodiversity, it decreases the biodiversity of our local ecosystems, or it increases the biodiversity. They choose their claim, and then they support their claim with evidence from the unit and reasoning. Lesson 11 is one of my favorites. So at this point in the unit, students have a solid understanding that native plant communities form the foundation of biodiverse, healthy ecosystems. They've modeled the healthy ecosystem. They know that that healthy ecosystem supports a diverse food web, and that less plant diversity means less overall diversity in the ecosystem. And now they're ready to really learn about restoration practices, right? So they have this scientific understanding of what makes an ecosystem healthy, but how do you restore a damaged land? How do you restore damaged land in your schoolyard or in a local land trust preserve to make it more like a healthy ecosystem? What practices do restoration ecologists use to restore ecosystems? And also, what can we learn from Indigenous peoples about how to relate to and restore land? So the United Nations has an excellent resource called the Restoration Playbook, which is very conveniently written at a middle school level. I was thrilled to find that out. And it just shows, the table of contents has like by ecosystem. So they have grassland ecosystem, forest ecosystem, riparian. So students choose the ecosystem that best fits their restoration site. So shrub step for grassland, forest. We have a few schools or a couple schools doing riparian restorations. And then it's just one page and it kind of describes an overall, like, these are the practices restoration ecologists use to restore this type of ecosystem. And all of it says plant a diversity of native plants. So then students get even deeper into restoration practices by watching and using a guided question, handout with questions. This amazing documentary that I really recommend. It's only 30 minutes and called Dream of Trees. And it's about two restoration ecologists in the rainforest of India. And they essentially they're restoring old cardamom and spice plantations back to healthy rainforest. And they go through it step by step, and they share all sorts of really relevant practices, such as we had to remove noxious weeds. And then we had to grow seeds in a nursery because you can't just, plop a seed on the ground and expect it to grow. So we had to grow the seeds in a nursery and then transplant them to our restoration sites. And they also talk about maintenance and monitoring. And they talk a lot about the importance of planting diverse plant species and the importance of biodiversity. So it was just like, I couldn't believe it when I found this documentary. It's like, this is perfect. Like, it just sums up everything in the unit, and it gives students some of the basic tools they need to start designing their own restoration plan. So lesson 12, this is the last lesson of the unit. How can we design the restoration site to make it more like the healthy ecosystem? So working in groups, students use those healthy ecosystem models that they've developed over the course of the unit, and they apply their understanding of how a healthy ecosystem functions to design an ecosystem restoration proposal for their site using the engineering design process. So I'll be quiet for a couple minutes if you want to read this letter that students get on the last day of the unit, which has your name signed. I hope you don't mind. Teacher will plug your name in. Okay, so a couple things. There is a checklist then. They get more scaffolding to create their proposals. I didn't include the checklist here. Another thing is that, this letter is tweakable. So obviously if you're in Western Washington, the assignment will be make your restoration site more like a healthy forest ecosystem. And the other thing you may have noticed is the restoration toolkit. So let's see, here we go. So this is one of the documents that we are asking you. And I know Gretchen and I are doing it a little differently in East and West. So, I'm not sure, maybe Gretchen is collaborating more with you on this part, but for me, at least in Western Washington, the stewards are filling this out. So this is kind of a 1-pager, at most 2-pager that we're asking stewards to fill out. And it just has some basic information, and it let me rephrase that. It has the materials and tools available to design a restoration plan. And so, for example, the length of the restoration site, the width, the soil type, and any other relevant information. Is it close to a stream? Are we trying to improve habitat for sage grouse or for salmon? Or, are there any target wildlife species? And then this is a big one, the plants available. So we have ordered or already in the process of ordering plants for each restoration site. And we're just going to list the species here using the common names so that students know which plants they can choose from. And then any tools and restoration methods available. So, and a brief description of how restoration ecologists use each tool. So for example, a shovel is used to dig a hole to plant a plant, or if you're in Western Washington, mulch, you can say mulch is used by restoration ecologists to suppress weeds and hold moisture in the soil, and any other tools you may be using for the project. And then also some information about how many feet apart the plant should be spaced. So maybe it's 2 feet, maybe it's 4 feet, but this is going to allow students to use math. So we can integrate math here to calculate how many plants they need for the restoration site based on the number of feet apart and the length and width of the restoration site. And so I know some of you may have already filled this out, though some of the stewards on the West have, but as year coordinators, we'll also remind you of this. We'll send it out. We'll help you. We'll edit it. This isn't like the last time we're going to tell you about this. That's it. Any questions about the curriculum? And I'll just say one more thing is that, oh yeah, okay, this is important. I almost forgot, and I'm sorry, I'm probably talking too much here. The last thing I'll say is that the idea is that students, they make these restoration proposals for the restoration site. But the expectation is not that they implement their exact proposals, right? They're not professionals. That's where you all come in with your knowledge. And so you're implementing your plan. But what we've done, hopefully in the curriculum and using this restoration toolkit, is set students up to write proposals that are going to have significant elements that are correct. They're going to understand that they need to plant a diversity of plants. They're going to understand that, some practices of restoration are removing noxious weeds and planting natives and maintenance and monitoring. And that's really, I'm not showing it all to you, but that's really, really scaffolded and guided. And so the proposals that they give to you are gonna, I hope, this is total experiment, we'll see, but I hope they're gonna be in the ballpark of viable proposals. And then this is something that's totally flexible, but if you're interested in seeing these proposals, maybe giving some really brief feedback, like short email. I'm not asking you to give full-on feedback unless that's something that brings you joy. Give students feedback. And so we're not asking you to review 50 proposals. You know, this you can work out with your teachers, but maybe you're willing to take a look at 3 proposals. You know, maybe the teacher selects the top 3 or 5 proposals and you're willing to give them a look over and write those students a short email just saying, hey, you know, really like this. Here's what I suggest for improving your proposal in order to meet our goal of making the restoration site more like a healthy ecosystem. Yeah, so then when they're doing the restoration work, you know, they're going to recognize big components of their proposals in it. And the idea, of course, is that they feel ownership of the project and not, you know, being told what to do. Here's a plant, plant it. We don't really know why we're planting it, but that they're really invested in the work they do with you. Okay, I probably went on too long. So thanks for listening. And any questions? Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about photos on the jam boards and, you know, going through the ecosystems and kind of comparing those two ecosystems. Who's taking the photos? Is that the steward, the children, the teacher? Is that something you just pull off the internet, you know, rabbit brush, you know, where do you get these photos?
Yeah, excellent question. Let me see if I can really quickly screen share, or actually, never mind, I'm not going to screen share now. I'll just answer it. So the photos are all provided, and they're provided in the Jamboard and using image banks. And so I've uploaded photos of organisms from, these are 2 separate Jamboards, one for Eastern, one for Western Washington. And their photos, the photos of plants are from the Burke Herbarium in Western Washington. And so I've uploaded like the most common plants in a healthy shrub steppe and most common plants in a healthy mature forest in Western Washington. And then I've uploaded photos of common, or not always common, but consumers of those plants. So a lot of insects and including a lot of like host or insects of host plants and birds, and then other mammals, reptiles, and amphibians. So all those photos are ready for students, and all they have to do is copy and paste them into the templates. And I thought a lot about that and was like, went through a lot of iterations. You know, maybe some of you who have been with us more from the beginning, like even just a few months ago, I was thinking students might take those photos or find those photos. And in the end, I decided just to have all those photos ready to go for students.
Any other questions?
Well, yeah, actually there is. In the scrub steppe ecosystem, water is not readily available like it is on the west side. So when we are picking our restoration zones, you know, our restoration site, you know, how do we address the issue of water, you know, and where, you know, how, because we're going to have to, you know, when we're putting in these new plantings, they're going to have to be at least maintained until they're established, because, well, it's how you get them to live longer. So, you know, is that something we address, you know, to the kids? And again, sprinkler systems. A lot of schoolyards have those great expanses of lawn, and to, you know, is that something we can work with the administration to say, okay, this is the non-sprinkler zone, or, you know, how do we accommodate that?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Gretchen answer that because she's you know, done all the work on that for each of the restoration sites. The only thing I'll say is that yeah, for the schoolyard, well, you know what, Gretchen, why don't you answer that?
Okay, yeah. And the answers will be different depending on, you know, what habitat you're working in, things like this, but obviously shrub steppe, the ideal is to water new young plants, at least for the first year and hopefully for the second year for survival. And I'll just say quickly that planting, the way you plant your plants also has an incredible amount of survivorship if you plant the plant correctly. So that will be another thing that we cover. But so for at each school, we haven't talked with facilities, and I have identified a water source, which at Petersen, and that's there's a long hose that can reach out and water those plantings. And I'm just thinking, even just like if they were watered like twice during the season, soaked really well for the season. And then for Wahluke, there's a summer school program where they're thinking about inviting students to water each plant using a watering can. So that issue of watering will be addressed in the shrub step at the two schools. But very important question, and it's also an important lesson for the students. And then another part of it too is, in my career, I've planted tens of thousands of plants in the shrub step that got no additional water. And it was mainly sagebrush. And depending on the winter, we had anywhere from 70 to 80% survival rate. So some locations you can water, and some locations you won't be able to water. But good question, D'Artagnan. Okay. Let's see, actually, why don't we, any other questions or even comments?
I was just going to make a comment that having this curriculum baseline and understanding it really helps understanding how the restoration fits. So thank you for spending the time to do that. It's helpful.
Good, I'm glad.
Yeah.
I did have a question.
Yeah, you're gonna yeah, go ahead.
Have you thought about using maybe like wildlife cameras to monitor either wildlife in the restoration site, or maybe even like time lapse it so you can watch it grow?
Yeah, so that is an awesome idea. And what we're providing teachers with is a unit. And my greatest hope for this curriculum and this program is that we're providing a super solid foundation that teachers, and maybe in partnership with the land managers, the YEER stewards, with you all, that they'll think of all those cool ideas, like having wildlife cams and monitoring growth. And that, you know, if you'll excuse my metaphor, out here in Western Washington, we have nurse logs. And I hope that we're providing a nurse log that many seedlings will sprout from. And so I would see like setting up a wildlife cam, if that's a possibility, like if you have a wildlife cam and you can offer it to the teacher, that is so awesome. And like offer it to them and see if they're into it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I liked that metaphor, by the way.
Oh yeah, me too.
What'd you say?
I said I liked your metaphor.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and same too, the kind of similar to nurse log is if you're, sagebrush doesn't survive fires, but you're planting small sagebrush that within 3 to 4 or 5 years, they're actually producing seed, and spreading that seed within your restoration site and also into the habitat. So that's another like cool analogy to be made. And I'll just say, other ideas that came from the teachers are for these restoration sites, have any cultural resources people come to the site, checked it for indigenous remains or cultural artifacts. And that's also another really awesome idea that we hope in future that as these networks of stewards and teachers and practitioners grow over time, that we're able to raise money to cover these things and eventually integrate them. But But for now, we're sticking with, for the first pilot year, Janneke's curriculum. But these other ideas that you have, please share them, because there are just so many wonderful possibilities.
Well, and you can do them all this first year too. I should say you can offer them to the teacher and see if the teacher is interested, because like there's so much potential for, yeah, like studying the growth of the plants that they plant in the fall. I haven't developed any lesson plans to support teachers in doing that yet. Maybe that's a goal in the future, is to create kind of a list of like, here's some cool like monitoring and maintenance and observing activities you can do at the restoration site. And maybe like a wildlife cam investigation would be one of those. But you know, if you have a teacher who's into it and you have a resource to offer them or an idea, I mean, I don't see any reason why you can't, you know, bring it this first year even. Just knowing that they might say, you know what, I've got too much on my plate with it's a lot for teachers to pilot new curriculums. It really is, as you teachers in the room know. So sometimes the first year they kind of just want to do it as is, and then in the second year add on all those cool seedling ideas.
Exactly.
Will we have a chance to meet the teachers before this all gets started?
All of mine have. I don't know what your plan, Gretchen, is for. I have them, but maybe.
I hope to via Zoom.
Okay.
Because we're spread across the state, and some people are driving an hour to get to the locations and things like that. So I'm hoping that we do y'all get to meet each other. And just kind of adding on to Janneke's concept and some of the origin of the idea and concept behind this program, which I just want to say we both understand how challenging this is. This isn't we didn't set a low bar to accomplish this program. We set a pretty high bar to include plants and recruiting volunteers and just doing a massive amount of coordination and teaching as we go. So that's why I hesitate to add on to the teachers right now. Let them get through this first year, and that, you know, we can, as we collect these ideas, have them present a list with these things. And yeah, just some great ways to possibly extend the program. And again, what we're trying to do is we want this program to run for decades. I know it sounds a little crazy, but at this time in 2021, we really need to start connecting with this age group and letting them know, for some students, they might have a limited idea of what job or career they could have, but to kind of expand on what some of their future careers could be. And even if it's not, you know, you're not designing or restoration plans or growing native plants, you know, maybe you're a tech writer, maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're outreach and marketing coordinator around restoration and conservation ideas. So we want to keep it broad and include all the things that a student could possibly go into, just to give them those ideas that they might not have. Well, thank you, Janneke, for that introduction. And why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break. Right now it's basically it's 10:09. So let's meet back at 10:20. Okay. Thank you. See you back at 10:20.
Okay. You mean the part 2 of lesson 1 or day 2 of lesson 1? Yes. And sorry for, you know what, I wasn't planning on moving around your schedule. And then like, as I was speaking, I was like, oh man, it makes way more sense for me to introduce the curriculum right now rather than at the end. Yeah. Okay, yeah. And I didn't know that until I was saying it out loud. So I'm sorry I didn't realize that yesterday. But my thinking was that it just gives an overview and a foundation. And then also we can, if I go, what I would suggest, if I may, is that I do the day 2 of lesson 1 overview at the very, very end. So just give me like however much time you want at the end, 15 minutes minimum or 10 minutes minimum. And then you can go over all the other stuff, and then we can just excuse the Year West stewards. Not that many of them showed up. And then, but luckily it's being recorded. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And a great suggestion.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I kind of just saw it early when we started. Yeah, I mean, I assume because I saw on your agenda, you're going to go over each of the 3 days and general stuff and safety. So just take your time, and if I only have 10 minutes, I'll make the most of it. Yeah, but if I have more time, that's fine. Okay. Wiggle room, great. Yeah, and I was thinking I would just go over, I'm going to go over that day, and then I assume you'll go over it. I don't know if you're planning on meeting them out there an hour early before students arrive, so you can kind of like, we'll just assure them that you'll go over it again, and they'll have these lesson plans shared with them. Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yeah, that's good time. That's really good timing, actually. So this will be fresh, and then you can like hash out the details when you're there. Yeah. I'm sorry, my steward didn't show up. But I'm glad. I really thought Loretta. I didn't expect John to, because he's beyond busy, and I didn't expect Samantha, but I expected some of the other. Well, I guess it was just 3 stewards who didn't show up, who I was expecting. Oh, yeah, no, I won't say anything more about that. But yeah, sorry. Yeah. I think. Exactly. And I think actually it's fairly good turnout. When people hear it's recorded, some people prefer watching it on their own time. I think that's totally fine. Yeah. I'm not really concerned about copyright. I talk about that. I talk about that with the teachers, so I don't think I'm not concerned. Oh, yeah, I'm happy to share it if anyone wants a copy of the curriculum. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't even bring it up, but if I see it as in your agenda, so I wasn't quite sure what you meant by that, but if you want to bring it up, I'm happy to say a word or two about it. Yeah, but if you want to see a copy, Janneke, reach out to Janneke and she's happy to share. Cool. Well, I think it's going great. All right. See ya. Bye.
Okay, let's have folks kind of come back. Hope you had a good break. Got to stand up and stretch a little bit. I know everybody's, got a lot of stuff to do. And okay, great. Well, I changed the agenda a little bit. Janneke and I changed it a little bit around. And so actually I will start with the overview of the outdoor days. So Janneke covered information about the field trip, which the East Side, both East Side schools are doing a field trip, but Wahluke is actually doing a split field trip and a virtual classroom field trip. So that's more for teachers to know and understand, but you all will get the information you need depending on which school and which design they're following, okay? So actually, and I think that by October, November, the curriculum will be finished, but then they still have these other outdoor days doing some of the work. So depending on the west side or the east side, this will happen in October or November. And it's the first day, well, actually it's probably the second day they've been at their restoration site. And it's to just kind of go out there, you know, familiarize themselves with their plots and their areas. And I'll say again, there's differences between Eastern Washington and Western Washington. So I might use an example that's actually Western Washington. So if you have if it's confusing, just let me know. So we're presenting both sides of the information. And so, oh yeah, so, you know, as for that first day of school, we would gather maybe 30 minutes before the students arrive on site, and we would have all the tools and materials that we need for that day. And again, for that October, November date, they would be looking at the noxious weeds, and you would be helping them point out the noxious weeds and just kind of investigate the ground and identifying maybe some of the weeds that are more prickly. And perhaps you have some students or some leaders. I know for us, we have a few tumbleweeds that I just think that our stewards and leaders will deal with, so the students don't get like rashy arms or legs or something like that. And then also a note about the students will be asked to wear field clothes, so not their new runners and not their best pair of pants, but to wear long pants and closed-toed shoes in preparation for this outdoor field day, okay? So using tools, either a trowel or just a hand, or shovels, or maybe a different tool on the west side forest to deal with some of the Scotch broom. You would identify those tools in the restoration toolkit. And you would, we would have a safety, go over how to safely use and store these tools. And that also when we would have everything set up, so when they did arrive, the tools and all of the materials they need would be set up, and they could grab that very easily and have access to it. So, so it's basically just identify and removing the weeds. And I just have some notes here. We'll have 5-gallon buckets that the weeds can go directly into, and also we'll use just the 6-by-6 foot tarps that can be laid out through the site. And I like them because you can pile a ton of weeds on them, and then you can ask the students to each grab a corner and haul the weeds to a predetermined weed pile location. And we'll work with the school facilities to determine where that location is, okay? And just, you know, as you're working with your students, just remember to be authentic, be patient, maybe lots of reminders, and just, they will have some really incredible questions for you to answer. So please take those questions seriously. And then we will also, after we use the tools, again, each school will be different, but we will disinfect those tools using, I just think on the east side, we'll use a bleach solution. Is that your plan too, Janneke? Maybe she
Yes.
stepped out.
Yes. Yeah. Is that, we can talk more. If that's CDC guidelines, then we'll do that. We'll
Okay.
follow.
Yes, we will talk more about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so really, any questions about that October or November date? And yeah, D'Artagnan?
You said you're disinfecting the tools. Are you disinfecting the tools because of the COVID, or are you disinfecting the tools because of the spread of disease? It's for the plants.
Very good question. It was for COVID.
Okay.
And these ideas came up many months ago about what we might have to do depending on COVID. But I have a little note about that too further on, or we'll talk about COVID safety.
Okay, and one other thing. So we're identifying and removing the non-native plants in their local site.
Yes.
Have we already then seen what a good habitat looks like? They've already seen that, or have they not seen that, or have they just done research on that?
Well, they will have covered that in the curriculum.
But they won't have seen. So what the first thing is they're going to do is visually, I mean, when we go on a field trip, they will not have seen what the habitat is supposed to look like. So they're going to clean up this their bad habitat first, and then go see a good habitat. Is that correct?
Janneke, could you address that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And I know these are good questions. I know there are a lot of moving parts and pieces here. And the other thing that makes it complicated is it's different for each school, right? So, but in a nutshell, so you got the timing a bit off. So actually they look at, and this is built into the curriculum, but they look at a healthy ecosystem at the very beginning of the unit, right? So
okay, that's what I would think.
Yeah, exactly. And then they find out what because they don't know how to make a damaged ecosystem or a patch of dirt in their schoolyard like a healthy ecosystem unless they have a mental concept of what a healthy ecosystem looks like.
Okay,
so that happens at the very beginning of the unit.
Okay, great. That's what I wanted to determine, because it looked like the first thing we did in October, November was to identify and remove non-native plants for the site that we are basically cleansing. And if you haven't seen what a good one looks like, then you're going to be pulling up sagebrush and things that are okay to have in that system.
Right.
And so I just wanted to establish.
Students will know not to pull up sagebrush.
Well, in our system, sure.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and this part is for all the schools. So the 3 restoration sites the 3 restoration days that you do, 2 in the fall, right? Removing vegetation and site prep, planting, and then the 3rd day in the meeting. Those 3 days happen after the unit. So the unit happens, it's 4 weeks in the classroom. Students design their restoration proposals, and after that, and then they do their first restoration day. Yeah, great clarifying question. I know there's a lot of moving parts here.
Yeah, very good question. Okay, so that takes us to, the first day is invasive plant removal, familiarizing yourself with the site, not removing native plants, and learning how to use tools and safely use tools. And then in either November, December, depending on your school, the students will plant a certain number of plants depending on the school, and they will basically be using the design that they've worked on, and then the design that has gotten feedback from stewards, and they will implement their designs. So on that day, it'll be kind of crazy, but you'll have your plants laid out. And again, I'll just say for Eastern Washington, apologize to the West people for this, but in Eastern Washington, the whole landscape will be divided into smaller plots for pairs of students to plant, and they will choose from a diverse plant list. So once they have their smaller design, they'll go over and we'll have the plants laid out and labeled, and they'll pick up the plants that are meant to be in their subplot. And I assume a similar type thing will happen on the west side, where the plants will be laid out and labeled, and the students will follow their design and, you know, choose to put the right plant in the right place following that design.
Let me just quickly say, Gretchen, that we don't need to get into the weeds here, but we are doing it a little differently on East and West. And so in West, in East, Gretchen's actually having students implement their exact designs in, you know, certain square foot plots. In the West, they're designing kind of a general plan for the whole site. And the expectation in the West is not that students implement their exact design.
Thank you. So then, you know, just one of the things that we go out that day, it'll be really important again to go over how to plant a plant. And then I have a little graphic down here. And you'll want to, they will have covered this in the classroom about how to plant properly. But when you meet them out in the field, please do just a little reminder, and you can just demo it using a plant. And one of the things, as being a native plant grower myself, is that a lot of time and energy and water have gone into creating that little plant that has a very good rate of survival if it's planted in the fall time, well, when we have our water. And it's crucial to me that in this little graphic, you can see, well, I'll start with, you can see that the base of the plant right here, can you see my pointer? Yeah, the base of the plant right here is kind of buried down. And then in this graphic, the roots are kind of sticking up above ground level. Whereas in this graphic, this is the correct depth to plant your plant. So you don't want to bury the plant, and you don't want to have the top of the root ball sticking up. So, and again, on the west side, there might be a slightly different way that they do it. If they're going to be, they'll be using mulch. You guys will be using mulch, and you might plant your plant a tiny bit high and then mulch over it. And again, with restoration, people have many different ways that they do it, and just be open-minded to some of the ways, and some of the ways that Janneke and I might eventually choose a method is that it works easily for the students, okay? So, and for them to understand. And then we can demo this too before we meet at those days. But you can have your plant in its pot, and as you're digging the hole, you just want to make sure to keep that soil that you're digging out of the hole right next to the plant. Then you're gonna use your plant to kind of guide the depth of the hole and also the width. And then you'll depot your plant, place it in the hole, and then backfill the hole using the soil that has reserved. So in the past, I've had students just flick the soil away like 10 feet. But we really do need that soil to backfill the hole properly. And does anybody have any comments or questions about that? I was thinking about making a little video.
I have a couple of suggestions from having done this for a lot of years that helped a lot. Is one, it's super important to do a demonstration of how to plant the plant correctly to each student. And then we have, when you have like one steward per 10, then they're responsible. I have each student, after they put their first plant in, raise their hand and go by and check their plant to make sure that they're doing it correctly, because that can help you all the time get it done correctly. And because Gretchen is perfect. I mean, if you don't put the plants in correctly, they don't survive. And so if you really reiterate it to those kids that you are making the difference between whether this plant lives or dies, they get that message. And then the other thing we do is we put pots upside down next to the plant, and then have the stewards come back and check that it was put in correctly after the students are gone, kind of thing. Because then it gives you one more chance to correct anything that's an issue, or replant a plant once the students are gone. So, during that time period, so that then which plants have all been corrected, because then you're picking up the pots. So those are just a couple of techniques that I use that have been helpful in the past.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tina. Appreciate your comments here. And again, we'll just, I think I agree, just do a live demo, keep the soil next to the pot, and have this graphic where they understand. One of the things, if they plant the plant too deep, it could strangle, or it's not good for the plant for it to have its stem underground. And this is generally speaking. Some plants don't care if they're planted an inch too deep. But for our purposes, we just want to follow this basic recipe for planting. And I'll say, both on the east and the west side, if you plant a plant that's the root ball is kind of sticking up an inch or two, that actually acts like a wicking sponge, and it actually draws water out away from the root ball. So it's crucial to do that. Great. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have one point to make. It's very important, as a horticulturalist, when you are taking a plant out of the pot, we should demonstrate how to do that so you don't damage those young roots. And more importantly, teach kids to hold the plant, if you gotta hold the plant, to hold it by the leaves versus holding by the stem, because the stem is easily crushed, and that's your xylem. That's where you're going to get your leaves. Leaves can be replaced, but the roots are tender, and the stem, most kids, like everybody, likes to hold it by the stem, and particularly young herbaceous plant tends to not like that. It tends to then crush a lot of those cellular structures along there. So that's something to support, and if you've got to manipulate it, hold it by leaves. You can break off leaves. Kids are not, particularly the sage group, they're not the most gentle creatures on the planet. So that's probably a point to make.
Excellent. I'm taking notes, as you can see. Thank you. Anything else? Let's give people a minute to think before we move on to the third Outdoor Restoration Day. That'll be in April or May, again, depending on the school that you're working with. And again, this day might vary depending on what the teacher might have an extra question that they've asked. For example, when they've planted, they may have asked a question like, Janneke used an example, they might add lime to a small set of plants and have a control. So they can then in the spring see what that lime did or didn't do. But for sure, so in April, we'll go out, we'll see, we'll check out our plants, we'll take survivorship data. So again, if they planted 5 plants and they can only find 3, and we can tell them which species, then we can create a nice data sheet for that, for survivability. And then again, when you're out there, because the plants are in the east, the plants are tinier. So you want to always make sure, watch where you're stepping. And then, you know, in the introduction to these days, we will have reminders. Just watch your step. You don't want to step on your plants. And then again, of course, in the spring, we'll see our invasive weeds again, but they will look completely different. So in the fall, they'll see, well, I am focused on the east. I apologize. I'm east focused. But so some of the weeds will look just like tumbleweeds. They are actually dead. They've been uprooted, but they might then be blown by the wind to disperse the seeds. Whereas in the spring, the plant could just have a small rosette of leaves and they will look quite different. So that is a really rich part of the program, is to say, when plants grow, they look different from March to their flowering, setting seed, and then their dormant cycle. So that'll just be something that we talk about and are aware of. And in the jam boards that Janneke has created, she has placed multiple pictures of certain weeds to show them what the weeds will look like in the fall, and then what they will actually look like in the spring. And they'll be quite different. Yeah, and then so basically the weeds should be small, and your students should be saying, okay, now is this the weed, or is this my plant? So maybe you go out and you say, okay, identify all your plants from last year, and then anything else that's growing there is probably a noxious weed. But that's what you and us as stewards will help the students determine that. Okay. And again, I just want to say, we're not in a rush. We're not in a rush to do any of this. So just keep in mind that this is an educational program about restoration. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's as professional example as we can do to make it as relevant as we can for the students in these outdoor experiences. So literally just being outside with a student looking at a plant is pretty powerful. And you'll experience this when you work with your students. So again, this third day in April or May, you'll be taking survivorship data or looking at another factor that you may have tested when you planted. And then just, again, weeding, putting the weeds in 5-gallon buckets or the tarps, and then hauling them to a predetermined site.
When you're, sorry, I think I'm taking a little bit of a step back to planting the native species. Are you planting them in a bowl? Like, does that make sense?
Yeah, so for the east side, we have pots that are 10 inches tall and 1 inch diameter. Mm-hmm. So we don't need to make a bowl to plant in on the east side, but for the west side, you may have dug a wider hole, and maybe, I'm not sure, Janneke can speak more about that, if they're going to amend the soil or.
It's on a site by site case by case basis. Yeah. And it's up to the year stewards. I'm not. So one difference is Gretchen has a lot of restoration ecology knowledge, and I am a very eager newbie who is learning a lot. And I don't have a lot of knowledge about techniques right now and practices. So I'm truly relying on my year stewards to make all those decisions for each site.
Yeah, sorry, I only asked because I worked for WCC, so Washington Conservation Corps in Yakima, and we did sagebrush restoration, and we always planted the sagebrush in a bowl so that it could collect more water.
And that, I agree with that. And I think if you've planted it correctly and the rest of the soil that you've saved, you can make a little ring around the plant. So that's a very good point. And again, on the west side, it's up to the stewards, you know, and again, this is just, everybody uses kind of a different technique for different reasons. And this is one example of it. So plant in a bowl. And there's other reasons you would want to do that, to collect water and also give the roots some really easy, fluffy soil to expand in over the winter as they're growing. You know, they're not growing above ground in the winter, but they are focusing and concentrating their sugars and energy into expanding their root system during the winter time.
Gretchen, are
Yeah.
we going to have any kind of plant markers or little stakes or things like that for each plant? Because I know when I planted any kind of native plant, I mean, little things. So, you know, it's even hard to see them after.
Yeah.
In the spring. I mean, they're still little things with or little leaves. So it's right. You know, I think we should have some kind of marker system.
Yeah.
To you know, have that available.
Irrigation flags are on our materials list. And again, I think it's school by school. And again, your point too, that they're so tiny, and also they might just look dead, but they're alive, but they're dormant, and they already look dead before you plant them. So that's another lesson that will be covered, and we'll discuss those things. But I do have irrigation flags, and oftentimes the flags kind of make it colorful until the next year when they've grown and you can remove the flags and when you can see the plants. So very good.
Also, I was thinking about that. And also, is it possible to have, before we go out, to have photographs of, okay, this is what your young plant will look like. And these are the noxious weeds we found on our site. And this is what those look like when they're young.
Yeah.
So, you know, just.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with D'Artagnan. It's just tough, you know, at where we are. And some of them, it's really hard to distinguish what's a weed and what isn't a weed.
It will be challenging, but we just, again, we will all do our very best, and that will be perfect. It will be as what we need. We will do our best, and that is our expectation. We don't need to meet any other expectations, except really the main part of it is that we're creating this connection, the students connecting them to the land and to the plants. Exactly. And again, it's a daunting task, right? To teach all of these things along with this incredible curriculum. But again, we'll just do our best. And as we go through this, please continue to make comments and give feedback so we can incorporate this and improve this program in the second year. So your feedback is crucial. So appreciate that.
I was just going to add a couple of things for West Side. one of the things that really easy to identify plants is with flagging tape, and then you just make sure that they don't put it on the center stalk of trees, but put it on leaves, and that. So we'll include that as tasks for the students to do after they finish their planting. We'll give them a couple pieces of flagging tape to be able to do that. And second, for West Side, definitely making the hole twice as wide as the pot at a minimum is what we talk about, and the depth of the pot. So we'll go over, the size of the hole, because stuffing it into the little, just making a hole as big as the pot isn't going to work. And we'll talk about why and how you're interacting. And then, a lot of West Side folks get rid of all that rich soil and don't put it back in the hole, so that that's been the latest use of things. So it's a little bit different on how you backfill. I mean, it's sort of like trying to do tough love on West Side plants, because what they're going to grow into is that matrix that's left, rather than the really rich potting soil. So we tend to use the potting soil on the top of what you take off the roots, kind of as mulch on top. So anyway, a little bit differences.
Again, appreciate that comment, Tina. I love planting techniques and talking about planting techniques. Every time I hear something I haven't heard before, it's really cool. So unless there are any other comments about that section, we can move to, let's see, just steward responsibilities. Actually, I'm going to go down to the interpretive and pedagogical techniques. And I am not a formally trained classroom teacher. I am an informal science educator, focusing on outdoors and hands-on. And my education background is studying interpretation, which is another way of teaching information about things. And so part of that is it's an inquiry-based approach, where say you're working with a student and they say, is this plant alive? And you first say, well, what do you think? You don't necessarily feed them information. You want there to engage their knowledge that they already have, and maybe some of their intuition, and to use their hands and their senses to determine if they think it's dead or alive, right? So just asking questions in an inquiry way helps them solidify the learning. It enhances the learning and it makes it more relevant to them. And then just, I think you all will do this, of course, but use age-appropriate language, terms, and concepts. And we'll all do our best and get better every time we work with students. That's just something that's learned over time. And then you don't have to know everything. Again, we act like we know everything, but we really don't, don't understand everything about science particularly. And we're always learning new things. So if you don't know the answer, it's okay. Just say, you know what, I don't know, but I can find out for you. Or I don't know, but I think Tina Miller might know. Can you talk to her? So don't feel like you have to be the end all be all of technical or factual information. And then what goes along with this, and what I've learned in my courses that I've taken on interpretation, is if you're your authentic self, the students can relate to that better. And they know if you're not telling the truth, or they know, they can sense those things. So try to be just your most authentic, genuine self. And that helps the kids connect to you and learn from you.
Yeah, can I jump in, Gretchen, and just say, I remember really briefly. I remember when I went into environmental education, I thought I saw a lot of environmental educators around me who were like really big personalities, really charismatic, kind of loud, fun, and they were awesome. And many of them were being their authentic selves. But for a while, I felt like I had to emulate that. And that's not me. I'm like a quiet introvert. And I finally learned that really I can just be myself. And actually, when I'm my quiet, introverted, more soft spoken self, maybe I connect with those other students who are more like me too. And so just like Gretchen said, be yourself. Don't feel like you have to be, loud or just be whoever you are.
Yeah. It's your own personal technique through your own authenticity. And the people around you will feel that and know that. And so will the students. And then I just have here a quick recommended books. And this is for informal science educators. I just named 3 books that are incredible. And if you only got one, I would say it would be the third one there, Sharing Nature with Children by Joseph Cornell. That was written decades and decades and decades ago. But the concepts about how people learn are in that book. So you can train yourself to present information and concepts in a particular way using inquiry-based questioning. And it's an incredible book. So don't feel like you have to do that. But if you're interested in this, those are some pretty basic authors and books to check out. Now, talking a little bit about some scary animals that might be in the habitat. And the kids might be scared, and the stewards and other adults might be scared too. Over time, I've worked on my fears. But that doesn't mean it is a real thing. Fear is real. Fear can block learning and education. And so if we could just mentor and emulate calm and respect when we see that snake or scary spider, which we will see, don't freak out. Try not to freak out. I know if you have a serious fear of spiders, that's going to happen. But what we would like to do is educate about how potentially scary animals actually function in the habitat that they're restoring. So it puts the scary animal in its place amongst all the other living beings in its habitat or ecology. Anybody have any comments about that? Or stories about how they've dealt with it? Well, I'll have one. I was planting sagebrush with 5th graders, and I say maybe 4 students saw a snake go into a shrub, and we all stood around and looked. We couldn't find it, but as the kids who didn't see it, they were so excited, and it was positive. It's almost as if they had seen it too, because they knew it was right in the shrub, like 3 feet away from them. So this is a moment where if you do see something exciting, or you see an animal eating another animal or something like that, go ahead and take a moment to just like be in that cool moment of wonder and share that with them.
I was in a class with 4th graders when we found a camel spider, little ones, but trying to explain it's an arachnid, but it's not really a spider, and counting leg bits, and which of course we were trying not to remove said camel spider from existence because of course we have 4th graders, all of them, just converging on this poor hapless little creature. And just watching the wonder in their eyes. And children, I find in this age group, and a little bit more, really try to do what's cool. If being is cool in their group, they all will do it. And calling out those behaviors is a lot of fun. Just saying, why are you acting like that? It is, and working and having knowledge in advance of the things you're going to see, or you may see, is so vital, because you have to be able to diffuse those squeamish moments, and kind of be calm, accept that this is not the end of the world because something has crawled up your leg. It will not, most of the time, ruin your day. So, it's really important to be able to just, ignite the passion of all living things.
Very good. It's like nurture that moment. And, students will tend to crowd and just say, stay 3 feet back. You can see it from where you're at. Let's make a nice circle. Don't touch it. Don't step on it. Let's just observe with our eyes and our ears. Is it making any sounds? Do that inquiry-based thing then to just allow them to experience that. And then Janneke has created a really comprehensive pedagogy document that the link is there if you're wanting to learn more about classroom pedagogy. Okay, so we'll get to the safety here, and there will be more safety documents coming at you, and we will review those when we go visit our sites. But just basically, we're the adults. We're all responsible for the safety of the students that we're leading. And, we're out in an area where some kids may have never been before. Some kids may be super comfortable in that environment. But one of the things that we hope to have is when we get off the bus and when we go to our restoration sites, that we can see all of our students no matter where we stand, that we know if a student has wandered off, we can see them. And of course, we'll be saying the students will be put in groups prior that they know about. They know who their leader is, and they'll be asked to stay with their group. Just really basic stuff here. It's not like you guys don't already know this stuff. And then we'll have first aid kits. But one of the things is before the students are dispersed into the landscape, stewards, let's please walk the area to see if there are any ground nesting hornets or yellow jackets. I had a bad experience with that with some students, and it was terrible. It was a learning experience, but we don't want any of our students to experience that. And then, if they need to go to the restroom, they'll have plenty of opportunities to use the restroom before and after. But if they do, get the teacher's permission for them to go to the bathroom. And please don't escort any of the students to the bathroom. We'll just let the teachers handle that, right? And then, if there's an injury, seek out the teacher. And then also, if there's a student that has consistent poor behavior and is disruptive to the other students, there are certain techniques that you can use and work with them. One of them is to ask them questions. And then also sometimes if you're carrying a bag with some tools or something, you say, could you be my tool carrier for today? I really need some help. And this is an important job. Could you please do that for me? And sometimes that's all they need. They need to be recognized and included. But if it is a continual disruption, go ahead and let me know or one of the teachers, and we can help you with that. And then of course, if there's an injury, we'll let their teacher know what's going on, and we'll make a plan about how to treat the student depending on if it's a minor injury or major injury. If there's some major accident, please call 911. I mean, we're not medical staff. We're not responsible for doing hardcore medical treatments. So just seriously call 911 if there's some serious injury. And then in our pre-planning, Janneke and I, for each location, we do know the names, address, and phone numbers of the closest medical clinic or hospital. So that's part of our coordinator responsibility.
But they shouldn't take anyone, like stewards shouldn't take children in their cars to the hospital.
Right. Thank you. Yep. Any other comments about that? Feedback, comments? Again, this will be another, we'll go over this again because it's important at some point. And then for Eastern Washington, the principal was concerned about rattlesnakes. And we're going to do a special lesson in that school to teach about the awesomeness of snakes and rattlesnakes. And we'll do a little stomp dance as we go out into the restoration site to kind of warn the snakes and kind of rid them of the area. Do our best. And then just, if there's terrible smoke or wind or hail or rain, or it's too hot or too cold, we'll cancel and reschedule. That's life when you do outdoor educational programming. Okay, so responsibility, everyone shares. And again, I know y'all are adults and can do this, but just it's a reminder and part of my responsibility as a trainer. And just, maintain the best safety practices by encouraging and letting them see you use those best safety practices, model that behavior. Encourage, perseverance and hard work. But also if they need to take a break, they need water, they need a snack, they know what they need. They know what they need in the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you have to go to the bathroom or you're hungry or there's something, you've got a sting, your mind is not available for learning. So that's why we say, please use the restroom, please get a snack, because otherwise they're thinking that they're hungry. And then they are not available for learning. So we really intentionally create these situations so learning is the top priority. Get kids excited about restoration work and the difference they are making in the ecosystem that's basically their wider global community, or what I call their big backyard. And again, ask those inquiry-based questions, really listen to students' ideas, like seriously listen to their ideas. Encourage their curiosity and their questions. And then of course, have fun. Part of learning is like, if you're not having fun, you're not learning. Or if there's something bothering you, you're distracted, you're not learning. So just sort of, create that positive atmosphere. And then just a note about COVID. We will follow the school district's rules at the time that they're made. And just an example at the Walook School, currently right now, masks are required indoors by all people at all times, but no masks are required when outside. Now, I will be wearing a mask myself, so you can make your own personal choices around how you want to deal with that. Okay, I know it's a big issue, but that's what we do ask of our stewards. But we won't be indoors, we'll be working outside, okay? And then, okay, so. Yes.
Question, what about trash? I'm kind of skipping back to something. I was just thinking about, going to our sites and things like that, you know, kids always get distracted by anything. And, you know, are we going to go to the sites beforehand and kind of pick up trash and kind of clean up the site? Because, you know, open areas tend to just accumulate stuff. I mean, how are we handling that?
Excellent point. In each site, if there's a big piece of trash that's been identified, we've worked with school facilities to remove those before the students enter that site. And one of the things too is maybe on the first day, or maybe they've gone out and they've visited the site prior during the curriculum, and they will remove the trash. The teachers are like, oh yeah, they're going to pick up all the trash. Every time they come out, we're going to pick up the trash because they're stewards of their land, right? And in Eastern Washington, it's so windy, there's always trash. Even if it's not from the school, there's always trash to pick up. But yeah, we will address that.
Yeah, I think as long as it's not anything dangerous, it's just another thing that they can be responsible for in their own restoration site.
Very good. Yeah. So anything dangerous, we've already identified and removed. So excellent. And then I'll just note on equity, the NGSS, and this is from Janneke's documentation, the Next Gen Science Standards and NRC framework outline science literacy goals for all students and call for equity to be at the forefront of any effort to improve science education. Students of all backgrounds should have a fair opportunity to participate in science actions and learning that are authentic, relevant, and engaging. The overarching goal is for all high school graduates to have sufficient knowledge of science and engineering and engage in public discussions on science-related issues, be careful consumers of scientific and technical information, and to be able to enter the careers of their choice. And Janneke, did you have anything to add to that equity statement?
No.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I probably do, but I'm not going to try to produce something right off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think that's great. You found that in the NGSS document. That was good.
Yes. Yeah, great. Just, okay, so we're ahead of schedule, we're on schedule, and we kind of changed the agenda around a little bit. So now we will actually finish up with Janneke, going over the rest of the actions for the outdoor days.
Yeah, so I'm actually, just to amend slightly, thank you, Gretchen. I'm not gonna go, so Gretchen went over the 3 restoration days. And what I'm gonna do is go over that first day of or not the first day, but the second day of the unit, at the very beginning in the early fall, when students go visit a healthy ecosystem. And again, so this differs by school. For example, for Rose Hill, we're not taking them on a field trip to a healthy ecosystem. Number one, because they have a diversity of native plants in their schoolyard, so we can do it right there in the schoolyard. And number two, there's 350 students, and so we're not taking them on a field trip with buses and everything. So I'm just going to talk about. I'm just going to talk to in fact, if the Western YEER stewards, right on, that's just Tina. There are other Western YEER stewards. A lot of them work and we're busy today, so they're going to watch the recording of this. But I'm just going to go over that field trip. And Tina, since I'm doing the in-class version, you're welcome to leave if you want. If you're curious, you can stay. But I'm speaking specifically to the Eastern stewards now, who are helping Gretchen lead that field trip to a healthy ecosystem. So if any of you, aren't, and I know it's like different for each school, but if any of you aren't helping Gretchen with the field trip to a healthy ecosystem, feel free to go make another cup of coffee right now or tea or whatever, and come back in maybe 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. I'll stop my video. All right. So again, this is, maybe I should have called it lesson 1 and lesson 2, but this is lesson 1, 2 parts. So, or day 1 and day 2. And day 1 is taught in the schoolyard by the teacher. And again, right now, because actually all of the stewards, all of you in this room right now have schools with restoration sites that are in the schoolyard. I'm going to talk about this version where the restoration site is in the schoolyard because it's most relevant to you. And you can just know that there are other YEER schools in the West, 2 others, where the restoration site is actually in a local land trust preserve. And so that looks a little different for them. The structure, the unit's the same, but this first lesson looks a little different for them. So day 1, the teacher, and I actually went over this already, so we'll just go really quickly. So day 1, the teacher's going to say, hey guys, let's go check out our schoolyard. It's a nice day. Have you ever really looked around? And they'll walk around. Teacher will say, we'll make some observations. They'll say, hey, let's go look at this one. I think there's this one location we should really focus on. They take the students to the restoration site. Don't tell them it's a restoration site yet. The students will use their 4 senses to make some observations of the restoration site. So you can see that handout there that they fill out, and they sit spaced out in their restoration site. And then they come, and I'm just telling you this quickly. I'm going to get into the part that involves you in a second here. And then they go back into the classroom, and the teacher says, okay, so we observed this location in the schoolyard, and now we have this really interesting assignment from the Washington Native Plant Society, and we're partnering with this steward named, and they'll name you, and a land manager if they're involved. And then they say, and our assignment is to make this restoration, this area in our schoolyard, more like a healthy ecosystem. And so then they say, well, what is an ecosystem? What is a healthy ecosystem? And the teacher says, let's go visit a healthy ecosystem to find out. So now we're at day 2 of lesson 1, which is the field trip. And that's where you come in. And so this field trip, it's on the 2nd day of the unit. It's led by the YEER coordinator, or Gretchen, in the East. But your help is really crucial because your role, your main role is to lead small groups, right? Because we can't have a huge group of 50 students all milling about. So you'll have your small group. I think our ratio is going to be 10 to 1. So 1 adult for 10 students. It might be a little higher than that for East, but, and then you're going to take your small group around, and there are, so this is kind of the basic overview of the day. So the purpose or the questions for this field trip to a healthy ecosystem, the questions are, what is an ecosystem? What does a healthy ecosystem look, smell, sound, and feel like? So they're going to visit in Eastern Washington a healthy shrub steppe ecosystem. That's the Wind Horse Farm, which sounds pretty amazing. What's the name of the other healthy ecosystem, Gretchen, that they're visiting?
Badger Mountain.
Okay, Badger Mountain. Yeah. So they'll visit Badger Mountain or Wind Horse Farm. And then they're going to do some activities just to get them thinking, just introducing them to an ecosystem and focusing on observation, as well as identifying native plants. So here's the agenda for that field trip. There's 5 things you're going to do. The first is an opening circle. This will be led by the year coordinator, or Gretchen. The second thing is a 10 to 15-minute wonder walk. So they actually did a wonder walk in their schoolyard, and these wonder walk, I'll go over that in a minute. So now they're going to do a wonder walk in the ecosystem. It's a silent guided walk. The third thing they do is they're going to sit spaced apart and make observations of the ecosystem using their 4 senses. Then they're going to do plant ID, each one teach one. And then finally a closing circle. And so the opening circle and the closing circle is led by Gretchen, or the year coordinator. And the year coordinator on this field trip day is not going to have a small group. They are the safety officer. They're kind of the person with the eagle eye view. Gretchen will be, or I will be in a central location. And then you all will be leading groups of 10 students around doing the wonder walk, the observations of the ecosystem, and then the plant ID. And also, this might be slightly adjustable. Like, I know that Gretchen is meeting you all at the site on Friday, or some of you. And so, you'll do these activities, but exactly how you figure it out, Gretchen will lead you in that for your specific site. So I'll just go through the activities in a general way. But so opening circle led by the coordinator is start with introductions. So the coordinator will introduce herself, and then each adult present will introduce themselves and briefly introduce the purpose of the field trip. So the coordinator here is just helping students understand how what they did the previous day connects to this field trip. Just a reminder. So they're saying, yesterday you read a letter from the Washington Native Plant Society, and they gave you a challenge. The challenge was to make your schoolyard more like a healthy ecosystem. I am a member of the Washington Native Plant Society, and the purpose of being here today is so you can experience a healthy ecosystem. So, and then you'll take this experience from this ecosystem and build off of it back in the classroom so that you can eventually write a proposal for your schoolyard to make it more like a healthy ecosystem. So then the coordinator will introduce the focus questions for the field trip, which is what is an ecosystem? What is a healthy ecosystem and feel like? Briefly go over the agenda for the day. Students really like to know an agenda, and it's important to share that briefly. You don't need to go into each thing, but just quickly say, okay, we're gonna do this, this, and this. And then let students know, any rules that the coordinator does this, and safety protocol, and where the bathrooms are and where they can get their basic needs met. If they need water, if there's a source of water for them to refill their bottles. And all that. So that's opening circle. That'll probably take 10, maybe more like 15 minutes. We'll try to keep it pretty brief since this is everyone. So all the students will circle up. And again, this is where like Gretchen will help guide it. Like if there's 100 students, she might split that into 2 groups. So since, and have maybe one of you can lead a second circle, for example. I probably would not do an opening circle of more than 50 students. So I might bring actually have 2 people lead those opening circles. And what I'm sharing with you now, I'm not asking you to memorize this. Gretchen is going to come with these printed. And so on the field trip day, you'll get your own set and you'll have the whole plan for the day, and you'll have these exactly what you see here printed out, so that you can follow the steps. You don't need to memorize this now. That would be crazy. So, all right, so the wonder walk. So from the opening circle, you're going to break off with your small group of 10 students, and you're going to find a trail, ideally. I know in Shrub Step, I'm not super familiar, but hopefully there's trails or areas you can kind of get away. And you're going to take your small group to, I got to plug in my computer here. Just give me 1 second. Sorry. sorry about that. So all plugged in. Okay, so the Wonder Walk, you're going to take them to an area, your small group, ideally a trail away from other groups, and you'll have your set of Wonder Walk cards, which I don't have here, but they're about 7 questions, and they're just getting students to start observing the ecosystem around them and think about who might live there and ways those organisms might be connected to each other. Just get into presenting mode here. So you'll have this set of cards, and Wonder Walk is actually one of my favorite things. I went to Islandwood through the University of Washington Islandwood graduate program in science education, and I did Wonder Walk the first thing when I got a group of students who came to this outdoor campus at Islandwood, and it was just like a wonderful way to kind of let them sink into the place quietly and kind of in a quiet way, and let them actually be. So this is a silent walk, and you're going to ask them to be totally silent for the duration of the Wonder Walk. And it'll last about 10 minutes. You can kind of gauge, you don't want to go much more than 10 minutes, but you can sort of gauge their, how engaged they are. And if you have to end it a minute early or something, that's fine. But basically you're going to walk slowly backwards. So you're facing the students, and then you'll hold up one card from your Wonder Walk card set. You'll hold up one card at a time. And students will follow you. I wrote in a line, but they'll follow you probably more like in a clump, unless you're on a narrow trail and it kind of forces them in a line. And you'll just give them a silent moment to ponder each question before you hold up another card. So once you've used up all the cards and walked, around, and, then you'll stop the group and circle up and ask students to share a few things they noticed and wondered. So I assume that Gretchen, when you visit the site this Friday or whenever you do, or if you meet at the site, an hour ahead of time before students come, I assume Gretchen will, guide you and be like, okay, maybe you're going to take your students here and you're going to take your students there. So you'll know what direction you head out in, and kind of help with the physical spacing around the ecosystem. So the second activity, the second of the 3 activities that students do, is they record observations of the ecosystem. So this is using the same handout that they used to make observations of the restoration site the previous day in their schoolyard. And so they make a sketch. So what you'll do is you'll take them to an area, and again, Gretchen will help figure out how to space the different groups around the ecosystem. But you'll take your group to an area, and each student, you'll instruct them to, sit apart. I would tell them to sit maybe a baby elephant distance apart, because if you just let them sit anywhere they want, you'll probably have like kids clumping together, and you don't want that for this. You want them to be spaced at least a baby elephant or a car distance apart, depending on how much space you have in your area. And you want to choose an area with a diversity of plants. I think you'll predetermine all of this, or all of the locations for each of the activities. And then you're going to distribute the student handout, which Gretchen or the teacher will come prepared with and printed, and give to you. So you'll distribute the student handout comparing 2 places and a pencil and a piece of cardboard to each student. And then you'll give them the instructions, which is literally just use your senses to observe this shrub steppe ecosystem and write what you notice in this table. And so then you'll give students about 15 minutes. That's adjustable depending on, each school has a different amount of time so it might be 10 minutes, you might have 20 minutes. And during that time, you'll just kind of, keep an eye on things, make sure students aren't interacting with each other, scoot them apart if they are. This is a silent time where students are tuning into their senses to observe this ecosystem. the last one on the last column there, sorry, the last row is plants, and the instructions are list as many different plants as you can see in this area. You don't need to know the name of the plant. Give a descriptive name for each plant. For example, spiky purple plant. This one's a really important row because we're later the teacher is going to help students see that they observed a variety of plants in the healthy ecosystem, and they observed maybe only 1 or 2 or 3 plants in this yard restoration site. And they don't need to know the names of the plants. They just have to, we're trying to move them towards observing that the healthy ecosystem has a greater variety of plants. Okay, so here's the last of the 3 activities. This is plant ID, each one teach one. So this is a really,
Nikki,
Yeah,
how-
go ahead,
Gretchen.
Thanks. Yeah, I was curious, can we allow students to draw? Because some of the students, aren't as facile verbally. Would that be acceptable?
Absolutely. Yeah. If students want to draw, do you mean for like draw the variety of plants? Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. They can always draw or write, whatever. That's a really good point. Yeah. And depending on the group too, I was kind of thinking like this might be your comfort level. Like you could ask them to stay seated, but then for that last row, if they want to like get up and walk around and count the different variety of plants, you could also allow them to do that. I feel like you can kind of feel that one out. It probably would be fine. Here's the third activity. And this is plant ID. So each one teach one. Actually, can folks I can't see your screen, but who's familiar with each one teach one? Can you just kind of say like I am, or maybe say in the chat. So why don't you say in the chat box if you are familiar, yes or no? Huh, I'm not seeing any. So is nobody familiar with each one teach one?
looks like Tina is. Oh, no, Tina said no. All right.
Okay. Okay. Great. Well, each one teach one is them. It is an Islandwood Great or Islandwood Classic. Every student who visits Islandwood does each one teach one, and it's a really important activity there. And so I really trust it as an excellent activity. And I've done it many, many times with students, and it's a great way to teach plants. So the way it works is, oh, darn it. Let me try something really, well, okay, let me go kind of do a broad, actually, let me try something. Share. Okay. I was hoping that I made these little, for some reason it doesn't work. I was hoping to give you a visual of how each one teach one works because it's really helpful. Does everyone see that slide now?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. I can totally do it. Okay. All right. So, well, first we'll do an overview. So, you're going to take your students to an area away from the other groups. And so this activity requires 2 adults. So I don't know exactly, how many adults you have. And this is where Gretchen's, will figure it out for each field trip. But it might mean that like if you have a group of 10 students that you combine with one other group so that you have 20 students and 2 adults. For example, that might be one way to do this. So, but it does require 2 adults, and it requires one of the adults to be able to identify 10 to 15 of the most common native plants. Just adults needs to know basic plant ID. So you're going to have a set of plant ID cards that will have a picture of the plant on it and the name. In Western Washington, we use the Islandwood cards, and they have ethnobotanical information and a bunch of cool like cultural uses and the name in the local tribal language and a lot of different things. In the East, I think you might just have the picture of the plant and the name, which is fine. So what you're going to do is you'll go to a trail, the head of a trailhead is ideal. And ideally a trail that, well, any trailhead will work. And you're going to have the students sit in a circle if possible. And then sorry, I was just reading Gretchen's note there. Yeah. So you're going to sit in a circle and then explain to students how this works. And it's kind of, it takes a little bit of explaining, and it's okay if some students are confused because it'll work out. But the way it works is you are going to walk, it's called Each One Teach One because the students are teachers to each other. And so here's my visual. This is going to be you. So the blue dots represent the students. The adults are the yellow dots. And so as teacher, you're going to walk down the trail a little ways. And this adult is going to stay back with the group of students. So this adult should have plant ID knowledge. They should be able to identify 10 to 15 of the most common plants in the ecosystem. Adult number 2 is going to send student number 1 down the trail. I'm going to say, off you go. And student number 1 is going to meet up with the teacher or the leader. And the leader, so the adult with the plant ID knowledge, is going to give that student the plant ID card for a plant. So actually I should back up a minute. The adult is going to choose a plant on the trail and then find the ID card that matches that plant. So if you're in shrub step, maybe the first plant is sagebrush. And so you'll find the sagebrush card. Here comes student number 1. You hand them the sagebrush card and you say, this is sagebrush. And in the West, you teach them like a cool cultural fact about it, or want some of the information on the card. On the East, you guys will figure that out. Maybe the cards don't have information on them. So you might, if you know anything cool about sagebrush, share it with that student so that they can teach the next student. If you don't, or if you don't, then you can just have that student maybe focus on observing, like making a cool observation of the plant that they can share with the next student. Or what I would do is have them think about how they can identify the plant. So have them touch the plant and observe it and smell it and basically come up with this is how you identify this plant. It has soft leaves or waxy leaves. It smells like crushed blank, so have the student come up with how to identify it.
Or I can also have, if you don't know, I can write up a simple one for each plant too. So
totally. Yeah. That would be great. Yeah. With cultural facts or fun facts. Yeah. Ecological facts. That'd be great. Okay. So now we have student 1. They are now planted with their plant on the trail. So the student is actually now going to become a teacher, because watch this. Plant ID adult is going to walk down the trail a little farther, and second adult is going to send student number 2. Student number 2 is going to walk down the trail, and boom, they're going to meet student number 1. And they're going to say, hey, what plant are you going to tell me about? And student number 1 is going to say, hey, I have sagebrush and it's super cool. And here's this cool fact I learned about it. And here's how you identify it. Here is how I think is the best way to identify it. Maybe they even have come up with a special name they call it to help them remember it. And then student number 2 is going to say, cool, thanks. And they're going to walk past student number 1 and walk down the trail to Plant ID Adult. And Plant ID Adult has found the second plant on the trail, pulled out the card for that trail and Gretchen's fun fact sheet. They're now going to teach student number 2 about that plant. Student number 2 now becomes planted there on the trail. Plant ID Adult walks a little ways down the trail and you can start to see the pattern. Adult number 2 releases student number 3. They walk down the trail, they learn about sagebrush. Cool, awesome. Remember, student number 1 is planted there the whole time. And student number 3 continues down the trail to student number 2 and learns about rabbit brush or whatever plant they have. And then student number 3 walks down and guess who they meet? Plant ID Adult. And they get paired with their plant, maybe it's globe mallow or globe mallow or whatever plant it is. They learn from the adult and so on and so forth. And like Gretchen said, the students become the teachers. And it's really cool because it's surprising how rare it is that students get to teach each other. And it's just a fantastic way to teach about plants because it allows the students to kind of become an expert in one plant and then teach the rest of the group about that plant. And so you continue this until all the students have a plant and have learned about the plant. And I might get confused here, but basically, let me see if I can kind of map it out. So you have all the students spaced out along the trail. It's okay if they are in eyesight of each other when you're setting this up, but when the Plant ID Adult, the lead adult, this person, you want to make sure you're kind of going far enough down the trail that students aren't going to be talking to each other. You don't want them you don't want these guys yelling at each other if possible. So just space them out as much as you can. So now you have adult number 2 is left behind here. They've released all the students and now it's their turn to learn from the students. So it's an opportunity if you're an adult who is helping out with this field trip and you don't Plant ID, this is great. You actually get to learn from the students. So, and maybe all of you do know Plant ID, either way, it's fine. And so you'll go to this student but then here's where it gets different. Now you take this last student with you and you both learn from this student. And then you take both of those students with you and you all learn from this student. And then the whole group moves together down the trail, and you just get this ever increasingly large group of students so that all these students can still learn about these plants, right? Because these guys have all learned about their plants. So now they're getting to learn about all these plants. So you're moving as a group. And eventually you all make it. Okay, I'll stop with the clicking, but you all make it to the end and you're in one big group and then you can debrief and you can say, what was it like being a teacher? Did you have a favorite plant? What's one fact that you learned about the plants that you're really going to remember? And so you have that debrief and that's each one teach one. Any questions about each one teach one? And this is written out in your printed copy of all these activities that Gretchen will give you. So don't feel like you have to have just memorized that, but any questions right now about it? Okay, great. All right, we're getting to go ahead. Oh yeah, right. So yeah, exactly. So Gretchen says she'll let you know how you're going to do it with 100 students. right? These are all, everything is going to be adapted for each site. Okay, so we're getting towards the end of our awesome field trip to the Healthy Shrub Step ecosystem. And it's time for closing circle. So you're gonna head back to the central gathering area where you had opening circle. And the YEER coordinator will lead closing circle. You'll join the big circle with your group. And the YEER coordinator will just revisit those focus questions with students. And so they'll say, you know, after having explored this ecosystem today, what ideas do you have about what an ecosystem is? You know, what does a healthy ecosystem look, smell, sound, and feel like? And then the YEER coordinator is going to say, you know, yesterday you made some observations of a location in your schoolyard, and today you explored this healthy ecosystem and made some observations, and they'll do a quick think, pair, share, you know, how are they different? How are they the same? And have a brief discussion. Everything's super brief. In large group circles, you want to have these conversations, but you don't want to linger too long. So call on a few students. And then wrap up. So say the coordinator will say on the bus ride home, I'd like you to think about, maybe discuss with a friend how your experience today in this Healthy Shrub Step ecosystem might help you make a plan to make your schoolyard more like a healthy ecosystem. And they board the buses and they go back to school. So that's an overview of the field trip, if that's what you're doing. And again, it looks a little different for each school. Some of the schools will have a virtual 50-minute version of this, which I know is hard to imagine, but it's an adaptation we're making for some of the schools. Yeah, any thoughts or the last thing I'll say is that on this field trip is setting them up for the rest of the curriculum. So, you know, like Gretchen said, it was really hard designing this because I was like, oh man, they could do an insect investigation. I want to like have them explore the biotic crust or the decomposers in Western Washington. And like, wouldn't it be cool if they could, you know, look at some wildlife and do like a wildlife science investigation? And I ended up choosing these activities with a lot of thought into, first of all, time constraints. You know, like sometimes it might just be that they have 3 hours. So this can fit into 3 hours, or it can be stretched out. But also really setting up for that, you know, the 4-week unit that they're going to do in the classroom. Yeah, any questions about that field trip day? All right. I think that's all I've got for the field trip then.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Janneke, for describing all of this wonderfulness with all of us. Appreciate it. And it looks like people have done this before, or now they're really excited about it because it's a really cool technique for teaching. And actually, we're just going to wrap up here a little bit. Denise, do you want to do your reminder? See if she's listening. Yeah.
I'm listening. I'm here. I just wanted to interject a couple things. One, you as stewards would fall under the WNPS insurance certificate that we'll have in place for each project. So I just want you to know there is a certificate of insurance that does cover the stewards. We like that stewards are members of WNPS, and I would love to offer that opportunity to you because that's my job. So thank you. I also just wanted to add to the COVID protocol piece that Gretchen mentioned about masks, that yes, currently masks outdoors are not required. However, we also know we're in a changing environment. And I wanted to point out that the school's protocols for COVID in working with children are primary to our operations. So if you see teachers masking, you should mask also. So just remember that you're following the teacher's lead in how they're providing for the health and safety of the students. And the other piece that has not been mentioned is that we do track steward hours. And if that is something that you would like to do, we do have a system where we could enter your project and track your service hours or any service hours of volunteers. So if that is of interest to you, please let Gretchen or Janneke know, and I can support that. Certainly, as far as the reports that Janneke and Gretchen generate as we go through this pilot year, your service hours are really important to us. So I, first of all, want to thank you for being here as volunteers in this program. It can't happen without a strong, robust volunteer network. So thank you for being here.
Great. Well, thank you for those reminders, Denise. Appreciate that, as always. And, you know, just I'll give a brief 5 seconds here for us to, if there's any last comments that anybody would like to share or make or questions, then we'll wrap up after that.
I just want to say thank you for spending all the time and effort to talk about the whole program in general. It was great.
It takes time, and we hope that you appreciate it, and we think it's valuable too. It will succeed when we all succeed. The program will succeed, and we want a high quality program where every person feels comfortable in the role that they're being asked to play, so they can also enjoy it and have fun. So, thank you, Tina. All right, with that. Thank you so much, and we'll be in touch very soon with y'all, and just appreciate your time today, and have a great week. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Hey, Gretchen, because I can't be there on Friday.
Yeah.
What do you recommend for me to catch up from what I'm missing, or?
I will let you know.
Okay.
Very good question. And you, I believe, in one other person, actually maybe 2 other people, will need a review as well. So I think that'll happen over Zoom.
Okay.
And then, of course, you can just imagine yourself doing these things in this landscape. But like one thing is actually, okay, sorry. Forgot what I was going to say, but so you'll be in charge of 10 students.
Mm-hmm.
And when we arrive at the site, you'll know if you're group number 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And I will have 6-foot bamboo poles placed in the greater landscape, so you know that your area for whatever group number you're assigned is over there, and we can see you and see all the students. So where you start and the space you need in that landscape will be defined by those flag poles.
Great.
And just in the meantime, if you have any questions, just please get them answered.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I would add, if you are interested in monitoring the growth with the wildlife camera, I could probably offer maybe 1 or 2. I'm not sure how many schools you have from Conservation Northwest, just because I think that it's a really great idea. And I think that everybody can benefit from seeing how this goes. So
I think it's an incredible idea, and we can actually, I've used them a little bit, but perhaps I can hook you up with the 2 teachers, and they can kind of decide, and go forward with that. So I'll do an intro between you and the 2 teachers, Cynthia and Mel, and we can go from there. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hey, Gretchen.
Yeah.
Somebody has mentioned Friday on a number of occasions. Are we doing something on a Friday?
We are.
This coming Friday?
No. Okay, sorry, I'm getting my schools confused. This Friday is for Wahluke. So,
Okay, good. That's not me. I'm Petersen.
Yeah. You're Petersen, and you'll be at Badger Mountain. And I need to set a date up. I've been.
Oh, good. Okay, so good. I wanted to make sure I hadn't slipped to get along there someplace. Like, I was not aware Friday was a target.
Exactly. No, you're good. You're good. Thank you.